That sound? A straight razor opening. Its pearl handle, gleaming blade. It's the metallic echo cutting through the air like a guillotine dropping. Table 4, Little Italy. 1952. The entire restaurant freezes. Every fork stops midair. Wine glasses tremble on tables. Waiters back toward the kitchen, eyes wide. Knowing they're witnessing something they'll tell their grandchildren about. If they survive to have grandchildren, Bumpy Johnson, Harlem's most feared boss, the man who controlled the streets with surgical precision, sits perfectly still at the table. Across from him, a Genovese capo whose face has drained to the color of spoiled milk. The capo just said the word. That word, the one you don't say. Not to Bumpy Johnson, not to anyone. Not. If you want to see tomorrow, the entire restaurant holds its breath. 43 people frozen in a moment that feels like glass about to shatter. What happened in the next 90 seconds changed everything. The power dynamics between the Italian Mafia and Harlem's Underworld would never be the same. Respect would be redefined. And one man would learn that some lines once crossed can't be uncrossed. New York City. Early 1950s, two criminal empires operated side by side in an uneasy dance of territorial respect and mutual profit. On one side, the five families. Old world hierarchy. Sicilian traditions. Men who kissed rings and spoke in whispers about this thing of ours. The Genovese family, under Vito Genovese, controlled vast territories across Manhattan. Legitimate businesses. Labor unions. Politicians. In their pockets, on the other side. Bumpy Johnson. Born Ellsworth Raymond Johnson, but nobody called him that. Bumpy ran Harlem like a Fortune 500 CEO ran a corporation with strategy, intelligence, and when necessary, ruthless efficiency. He controlled the numbers racket, the policy banks, the street-level operations that generated millions. But more than that, he had something the Italians could never buy. Genuine love from his community. They called him the Robin Hood of Harlem. When elderly women needed rent money, Bumpy paid it. When kids needed school supplies, they appeared. He kept hard drugs out of the neighborhood, protected local businesses. And anyone who disrespected Harlem answered to him. But tensions were escalating. A week earlier, a Genovese soldier named Paulie Benedetto had walked into a Harlem barbershop and slapped the owner for not paying protection. The owner's son, 17 years old, hit Paulie with a wooden chair. Broke his collarbone. Paulie's crew came back that night, looking for blood. They found Bumpy's people instead. 3 Italian soldiers ended up in the hospital. One would never walk right. Again, Vito Genovese, through intermediaries, requested a sit-down. Neutral ground. Smooth things over before this escalated into something. Neither side wanted a full-scale war that would bring federal heat and destroy profits on both sides. The location, a restaurant in Little Italy with connections to both worlds. The owner had paid tribute to the Italians for protection, but bought his peace in Harlem through Bumpy. A place where, theoretically, both sides could talk. Bumpy arrived at 7 p.m. sharp. Impeccably dressed, charcoal gray suit, gold cufflinks, burgundy tie. One bodyguard, a man named Frank Lucas, Kewa, who kept his hand near his waistband and his eyes on every entrance. Already seated at table 4, Tony Delucci, a Genovese captain, 15-year made man. Known in the streets for being hot-headed but protected by his uncle, a powerful underboss. Tony had 2 soldiers with him, both thick-necked and dead-eyed. The restaurant staff moved like ghosts, terrified. They knew who was sitting. They knew what this was. The conversation started civil. Barely. "Mr. Johnson," Tony said, not standing when Bumpy approached. A deliberate insult. "Thanks for coming." Bumpy sat anyway, smooth as silk. "Tony, You said this was important. It is. Tony poured himself wine. Didn't offer any to Bumpy. Another calculated disrespect. We got a problem. Your people put 3 of ours in the hospital. Your people disrespected a business owner under my protection, Bumpy replied, his voice calm, measured. Then came back looking for revenge. They found it. It's not the kind they expected. Tony's jaw tightened. Mr. Genovese feels that certain ... arrangements need to be respected in this city. Arrangements? Bumpy leaned back slightly. I'm not aware of any arrangements that give you people permission to shake down barbers in Harlem. You people? Tony's eyes narrowed. Let me be clear, Johnson. Harlem operates in our city. Manhattan belongs to the 5 families. What you do up there, you do because we allow it. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Bumpy's expression doesn't change. That's the terrifying thing about him, the absolute control. Men who knew him said his face was like marble when he was at his most dangerous. Allow it, Bumpy repeats softly. Interesting choice of words, Tony. Just the facts. Tony lights a cigar, blows smoke toward Bumpy without bothering to turn his head. You've got a nice operation up there, okay? Numbers, policy banks, your little street crews. Be a shame if someone decided it needed new management. Frank Lucas, standing behind Bumpy, shifts his weight. His hand moves closer to his waistband. Bumpy raises. One finger doesn't even look at Frank. The bodyguard freezes in place. Is that a threat, Tony? Bumpy asked, his voice still perfectly level. It's business advice. Tony smiled, showing too many teeth. From people who've been doing this a lot longer than your ... kind. There it was. That word, kind, dripping with contempt. The air in the restaurant thickened. Other diners, wise to the ways of their world, suddenly found their pasta fascinating. The owner, a nervous man named Giuseppe, approached with a wine bottle. Gentlemen, perhaps some, both men waved him away without looking. Giuseppe retreated like he'd touched fire. Let me make something clear, Bumpy said, leaning forward now, his eyes locked on Tony's. Harlem has never needed permission to exist. Not from you, not from anyone. We built what we have with our own hands, our own blood. We don't ask for scraps from your table. Tony's face reddened. In mob culture, respect was currency. To be spoken to this way, in front of his soldiers, in his neighborhood, it was unbearable. You got a mouth on you, Johnson, Tony said, his voice rising. You think you're something special? You think being the big man in that ghetto makes you untouchable? I think, Bumpy said quietly, that you should choose your next words very carefully. But Tony was past careful. Pride and anger had taken the wheel, and both were terrible drivers. Here's what's going to happen, Tony said, jabbing his finger across the table. You're going to pay tribute. It's 20% of everything that moves through. Harlem, policy, numbers, all of it. You're going to accept our oversight on your operations, and you're going to make sure your people understand that when they see us, they show respect. Or, Bumpy asked, or we come to Harlem and take it anyway. And you'll be just another dead. He stopped. Some tiny survival instinct finally kicked in, but Bumpy heard what wasn't said. Another dead what, Tony? Finish your sentence. Tony's soldiers looked uncomfortable now. Even they knew their captain was crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. Nothing, Tony muttered. Just business. Bumpy stood, buttoned his jacket. This conversation is over. When Mr. Genovese wants to have a real discussion between equals, with respect, he knows where to find me. He turned to leave, and Tony, feeling the eyes of his men on him, feeling his authority crumbling, made the worst decision of his life. You don't walk away from us, Johnson. He shouted, Standing so fast his chair toppled backward. Bumpy paused, didn't turn. Waited? You think you're special? Tony's voice was loud enough now that the kitchen staff could hear him. You think you're different from the other N-word-s running numbers in that ghetto? The word hit the restaurant like a bomb. A fork clattered to a plate. A woman gasped. A wine glass tipped over. Red spreading across the white tablecloth like blood at a crime scene. Even Tony's soldiers looked horrified. In 1952, mob culture, there were rules. It's unspoken but iron. You could threaten a man's life, that was business. You could cheat him, undercut him, even kill him if it came to that. But you respected him as a man. Tony had just shattered the sacred rule. The restaurant owner's face went white. He knew that his establishment was about to become a historical landmark for all the wrong reasons. Bumpy turns around slowly. The movement takes 5 seconds, but feels like 5 minutes. Every eye in the restaurant tracks him like he's the sun and their planets locked in his orbit. His face still perfectly calm. Okay? And that's the most terrifying thing in the world. No rage. No anger. No fury. Just cold, calculated precision. He walks back to table 4. His footsteps on the tile floor sound like a countdown. Each step is a second closer to something irreversible. He reaches the table, pulls out his chair, sits down, folds his hands on the tablecloth, right next to where the wine has spilled. And then he says, in a voice so quiet, everyone has to strain too. Here, say that again. Tony's face flickers a flash of fear before pride crushes it down. He's trapped now. If he backs down, he's weak in front of his men. If he doubles down, he's facing Bumpy Johnson. His pride makes the choice for him. You heard me, Tony says. But his voice has lost some of its conviction. Bumpy reaches into his jacket. Every gun in the room concealed under jackets, tucked in waistbands, hidden in ankle holster shifts. Safeties click off. Fingers find triggers. But what emerges from Bumpy's jacket isn't a gun. It's a straight razor, pearl handle, gleaming steel blade. It's the kind old barbers used for the closest shaves. The kind that could open a man from ear to ear if wielded with the right pressure. Bumpy places it on the table between them, closed, for now. He looks at it for a moment, then his hand moves to the handle. Click. He opens it. That sound, that single metallic click silences the entire restaurant more completely than a gunshot ever could. Because a gunshot means chaos, panic, everyone running. This means something worse. This means deliberation. You're going to pick that up, Bumpy says. Tony blinks. What? You're going to pick up that razor, Bumpy repeats, his voice still perfectly level, and you're going to make a choice. Tony's soldiers exchange glances across the table. One of them, the smarter one, slowly moves his hand away from his weapon. What the hell are you talking about? Tony demands, but there's a tremor in his voice now. Frank Lucas, Bumpy's bodyguard, has his gun out, no, not pointed, but visible in his hand. Aimed loosely in Tony's direction. Tony's men reach for their pieces. I wouldn't, Bumpy says. Not. Looking at them, eyes still locked on Tony. Frank's faster than both of you combined, and the second he fires, you've got 20 of my people converging on this location. They're already outside, waiting. It's true. Through the restaurants. Front window, you can see them. Men in long coats, standing on corners, leaning against cars. Waiting for a signal. Giuseppe, the owner, is on the phone behind the bar, his hands shaking so badly he can barely dial. Pick it up, Bumpy says again. The razor gleams on the tablecloth between them, reflecting the chandelier light like a promise. Tony stares at the razor on the table. His hand twitches toward it, then pulls back. Bumpy begins to speak. His voice is quiet, but it carries to every corner of the silent room. 43 people hang on every word. You have 3 choices, Tony. I'm going to explain them to you very clearly, very simply, so there's no confusion. He points at the razor. First choice, you pick up that razor and you apologize. Not to me, to every black man, woman, and child in Harlem who's ever had to hear that word spit at them like they're less than human. You'll shave your own head with it, right here, right now. Complete humiliation. Your men will see it. Everyone in this restaurant will see it. The story will. Spread through Little Italy by midnight, you'll be a joke. Tony's face flushes red. You're out of your mind, but Bumpy continues, riding over the interruption. You'll walk out of here alive, breathing, intact. That's choice 1. The restaurant holds its collective breath. Choice 2, Bumpy's eyes harden. You refuse. You try to shoot your way out of this. Maybe you get me, maybe you don't. Your men might get frank, they might not. But I personally guarantee, that you don't leave this restaurant breathing. And by sunrise, every Genovese operation in Harlem burns to the ground. The policy banks, the loan sharks, the bookies. All of it. Gone. Tony's hand moves toward his waistband. Think very carefully, Bumpy says. Do you think Vito Genovese wants an all-out war over your ego? You think the commission will back a shooting war that brings federal heat over one captain who couldn't control his mouth? The truth lands like a physical blow. Tony can see it in his soldiers' eyes. They know. They know the family won't back him on this. Not for a racial slur. Not when Harlem generates millions in annual revenue. Tony Delucci is expendable. The peace isn't. Now, Bumpy says, and his voice somehow gets even quieter. There's a third option. You stand up right now. You walk out that door. You never set foot in Harlem again. You tell Vito Genovese that Bumpy Johnson sends his regards, and the next man he sends to negotiate better come with respect. Or not come at all. The escape hatch. Bumpy's real play. He doesn't actually want to kill Tony here. Too messy. Too many civilian witnesses. Too much heat, but he needs total capitulation. It's complete submission. It's a demonstration so clear, so undeniable, that no one will ever question Harlem's dignity again. Tony's hand hovers over the razor. For a moment, one terrible, suspended moment, looks like he might actually grab it. Like he might choose violence. His fingers touch the pearl handle, but they're shaking so badly he can't get a grip. Every person in that restaurant sees it. It's the fear. It's the understanding that he's completely, utterly outmaneuvered. Tony grabs the razor and slams it down on the table. This isn't over, Johnson, he says, his voice trying for threatening, but landing somewhere near desperate. Bumpy stands, towering. Not physically. He's an average-sized man-butt in presence. In command, in sheer force of will. Yes, he says. Simply, it is. Tony looks at his soldiers. They won't meet his eyes. He looks at the other diners. They're staring at their plates. He looks at the razor on the table, still open, still gleaming. And then he turns and walks toward the door. His soldiers scramble after him, relieved to be leaving with their lives. The restaurant remains frozen for 10 more seconds after they leave. Nobody moves, nobody speaks. Bumpy calmly closes the razor. The click of it folding shut breaks the spell. He slips it back into his jacket pocket, reaches into his other pocket, pulls out a $100 bill, places it on the table next to the spilled wine, looks at Giuseppe, who's still clutching the phone. For the tablecloth, Bumpy says. And your trouble. Then he buttons his jacket, nods to Frank Lucas, and walks out of the restaurant like he's just finished a pleasant dinner. The moment the door closes behind him, the restaurant erupts. Everyone talking at once. It's the story already being shaped, refined, prepared for retelling. Word spread like wildfire by the next morning. Every major player in both underworlds knew what happened at Table 4. The story got bigger, with each telling some versions. Had Bumpy holding the razor to Tony's throat. Others had a full shootout. Barely avoided, but the core remained the same. Tony Delucci called Bumpy Johnson the N-word. And Bumpy made him leave like a whipped dog. The Genovese family response came within 48 hours. Tony was summoned to a social club in the Bronx. He walked in expecting support, solidarity, maybe even praise for standing up to the Harlem boss. Instead, he found Vito Genovese himself waiting, along with 3 other capos and a consigliere. The meeting lasted 6 minutes. Tony walked out demoted, stripped of his captain rank, pulled from anything involving Harlem. Reassigned to a crew running numbers in Quinza, humiliating step down. But he walked out alive, which was more than many expected. 3 days later, it's an intermediary, a lawyer who represented both the Genovese family and several Harlem business, Evered. A message to Bumpy Johnson at his regular table at the Red Rooster. The message was simple. Mr. Genovese apologizes for the disrespect. The matter is closed. Future negotiations will be conducted with appropriate respect. Bumpy nodded, sent back. An equally simple response. Accepted. That was it. No grand speeches. No dramatic confrontation. A 5 families boss had effectively apologized to a black crime boss. In 1952, it wasn't about morality. It wasn't about civil rights. It was about money Harlem was too valuable to jeopardize over racial slurs and wounded pride. But the effect was the same. The incident at Table 4 became legend. In Harlem, it was told as a parable of dignity and strength. In Little Italy, it was a cautionary tale about the cost of disrespect. It established a new rule that would govern interactions for years to come. You could negotiate with Harlem. You could compete. You could even fight if it came to that. But you couldn't disrespect it. Bumpy Johnson's reputation, already formidable, reached mythical status. He wasn't just feared, he was respected. Even by people who hated him. The razor became part of his legend. People swore they'd seen him sharpen it on the steps of his brownstone. That he carried it everywhere. That just the sound of it opening could make grown, caned men confess to crimes. Most of it was exaggeration, but some of it was true. The uneasy peace between the Italian families and Harlem held for years. There were still disputes, still occasional violence. But never again did an Italian mobster use that word in connection with Bumpy Johnson or his organization. And here's the deeper truth. It's the one that echoes beyond the criminal underworld. This was 1952 America. Jim Crow was law in half the country. Black Americans were fighting just for the right to sit at lunch counters, to vote, to exist as equal citizens. Yet here was Bumpy Johnson, criminal. Yes, but a man who refused to be diminished, forcing one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the world to recognize his humanity. It's complicated. He wasn't a civil rights hero. He ran numbers. He controlled illegal gambling. He broke the law daily, but in a system that offered few legitimate paths to power for Black Americans. He carved out his own. And he did it with a code. You could threaten his life, but you couldn't disrespect his dignity. The straight razor, not a gun. That choice was deliberate. A gun is impersonal, chaotic, the weapon of someone who just wants you dead. A razor is intimate, precise. It requires getting close. Looking your enemy in the eye, it's a weapon of someone who wants you to understand. Bumpy wanted Tony to understand, and he did, years later. In 1968, Bumpy Johnson died of a heart attack in a Harlem restaurant. Hundreds attended his funeral. Store owners closed their shops. People lined the streets. They buried him with several personal items, including a straight razor with a pearl handle, the same one from table 4. Because some moments, some stands you take are worth carrying into eternity. Respect isn't given. It's not granted from above. It's not something you ask for politely and hope someone bestows upon you. Respect is taken, and on that night, at table 4, with nothing but a razor and the willingness to risk everything for his dignity, Bumpy Johnson took what was his. The sound of that razor clicking open echoed through more than just one restaurant. It echoed through history.